shopping, flights, and jobs. And then they have content delivery products that don't begin with the traditional text-based search query. Think of Google Discover, Lens, News, Assistant, Play, just to name a few. And then we have a whole suite of products that assist them to drive personalization for their users. Think of things like Chrome, Gmail, Pixel phones, and so much more. Google is not a search engine. It is an ecosystem that allows it to reach and influence people often before they search. But Google doesn't expose all these traffic sources in Google Analytics by default. On the contrary, they hide the impact of most session-driving products behind Google Organic, or split data across multiple referrers like with Google News, or just show nondescript referrers. And no matter how many times you ask John, their behavior is not going to change. So we have to change our reporting. You can build a Google Data Studio dashboard that clearly reports KPIs for all your key Google platforms. And I'm going to quickly take you through how to create something like this. But don't worry about trying to note down all the filter rules and regex. The slides will be shared on social media later. So to start, you need to create a new view as to not interfere with your other channel reporting. And then you'll set up a filter to override the campaign source with a regex that processes the details of the referrer. And then you'll get source data that looks like this, which you can map to the relevant Google products. Now, this data isn't perfect. For example, Discover traffic from iOS is completely missing as it tracks as direct with no identifiable source. But this is significantly more useful than the default analytics reporting, although it's a little bit difficult to grasp in this format. So let's clear it up a bit with Google Data Studio. First, pull in the Google Discover KPIs. The impressions and clicks come from Google Search Console and the sessions from our custom view. Then you pull in your Google Search Console data for web, image, and video, as well as the search sessions also from the custom Google Analytics view. Now, one thing to note is that these sessions are a combination of 5 Google products: Universal Search, Google Assistant, Images, Lens, and Video. Now, afterwards, you can add in Google News, although one thing to note here is that the Search Console data is only for the Google News tab. So the clicks will be lower than your sessions because sessions includes the tab, app, and the site. If relevant, you can also add in business model specific products, such as Google for Jobs, which is tracked under the Google Organic Source Google Jobs Apply, or Google My Business and Google Merchant Center, which you can UTM tag to identify those sessions. And then you can go deeper with the metrics. You can add funnel KPIs such as bounce rates or new user acquisition or conversion. And with the right reporting, our picture no longer looks like this, but if you're a publishing site, more like this, reflecting the true channel makeup of Google sessions and making it abundantly clear that if you're still focusing on tactics such as keyword targeting and rank tracking, you're missing out on over half the pie. But this does not mean you should abandon all traditional SEO. You need to know the true channel makeup of Google Organic for your site, and only then can you understand the impact of your optimization efforts. And there are 6 key drivers that will move the needle on most Google ecosystem products. First, you need a brand that displays expertise, authority, and trust through uniquely valuable content that is topic optimized, both in its content strategy and in its technical execution, as well as pages that are mobile friendly, that can achieve a largest contentful paint under 2.5 seconds with rich structured data rendered on the server side. These are the foundations that underpin visibility across almost every Google product. But I don't see these as optimization tactics. I see them as prerequisites. And for this presentation, I'm going to take these aspects as a given and tell you some new things you don't yet know. And I'm going to begin where most digital journeys begin, on the homepage. And this means starting with Google Discover, which now occupies the mobile homepage of Google on Android devices and is also featured in the Google app when you swipe right on a Pixel phone, every time you open a new tab in Chrome, as well as within the search results in a feature titled Interesting Finds. Google Discover is a personalized feed that proactively matches content to a user based on their interests. Think of it like Google's version of Instagram, a friendless feed with the ability to follow topics or just browse content that you might like. And it's backed by the topic layer, which is engineered to deeply understand a topic space and how interests can develop over time as familiarity and expertise grow. And it's been added on top of the existing knowledge graph, which understands connections between people, places, things, and facts about them. Now, there are no keywords at play here. All the content chosen by Discover is based on entities, whether that is a brand, product, location, person, event, or any other thing. So optimization involves establishing entities. This could be your brand, your products, your CEO, so that they can either be connected to a user's topic of interest, or even better, become a topic of interest themselves. Now, there are no special tags or other technical requirements beyond being indexed by Google to be eligible to appear in Discover. So chances are this is already contributing a notable number of sessions for your site. But there is a difference between being included every now and then and being regularly featured. To get significant coverage, there are 5 key actions. Firstly, you can enhance your entity understanding by creating or claiming your Google My Business profile. This will allow you to show up with a dedicated listing in Google Maps and potentially with a business profile in Google Search. But the point here is to give as much high quality information to Google's entity understanding as possible. So be sure to take the time to properly optimize your profile. Secondly, if you have a knowledge panel when you search for your brand name, be sure to verify your entry and then strategically curate the information. This can be done by filling in all the pertinent information and using the Posts on Google feature, which allows you to publish messages that will show up in the search when people search for your entity. And what you can do is tag these posts with a topic. And now your posts are also eligible to show in the search when a user types the topical keyword, as well as in Discover when users have expressed an interest in that topic. And when you've created a strong enough entity, Google may choose to show in the Google Maps app or for a search in the Google app a follow button. And when this follow button is clicked, the entity shows up under your interests that power personalization across multiple Google products, including Discover and Maps. Just like they do on social media, users can specifically follow your brand or your products on Google properties. But sadly, also similar to social media, this doesn't guarantee your content will show to those users. It simply increases the likelihood. So, we have the Google equivalent of verified social media profiles, posts, and follow buttons. But what if you've tried to establish all these organic tactics but find it difficult to get a foothold? Well, there's always a back door with pay to play. I mean, you didn't really think Google would forget about the pushy monetization part. You see, in addition to manual inputs, the Discover algorithm personalizes content based on rich user intent signals, including a user's search history, browser history, and app activity. discovery ads can be targeted to run in Google Discover to audiences who you want to reach. And through the ad engagement, you can influence that user's rich signals. This
Hello, folks. Jess is just rejoining us. So Jess, no, it's okay. We all have internet issues. You got to the section about you talked about intent. So on the slide before, the one you've just shared. One back.
One back.
The joys of webinars.
The joys of Berlin internet being based on old cables, and so we don't have great connections.
Oh, it's better than Sydney, so it's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
So here I was talking about what you can do with discovery ads. So there's always this back door with Google where you can pay to play. So in addition to the manual inputs that you can do to influence the Discover algorithm, Discover also personalizes content based on what they call rich user intent signals. So this includes things like the search history, browser history, and app activities of the users. So what you can do with discovery ads is target them to run in Google Discover to audiences who you want to reach. And then through the ad engagement, you can influence that user's rich signals. And then this allows your future organic content to break into their echo chamber. But now we've very much gone down the CPC route, and I know we want to talk a little bit more on the SEO route. So let me switch the conversation here and talk about another organic channel, the channel of visual search. Now, Gary commented back in 2019 that image search was way too ignored for what it was capable of doing, and that Google would throw more engineers at it. And this is exactly what they have done. Google Images has been revived from the tired wasteland of repetitive stock images to an engaging visual content hub. Image search are now equipped with filters, related search terms, badges, captions, and other attributes to help you decide if the page behind the image has what you want. And when you click on an image, you're welcomed with an enticing snippet and a prominent visit button encouraging you to click through to the host page. These upgrades have made Google Images a driver of sessions in its own right, but it's not the reason why visual search is gaining prominence. Google Lens is. This platform allows you to use an image as your search query. You can do this in two ways. Firstly, you can select the specific element of any online image to trigger related results. This allows searchers to dive into images, making lifestyle catalogs, snaps of celebrities, travel pics, and so much more dynamic and actionable. You can also point Lens at something of interest in the real world to get related content online. This means that your storefront, your magazines, your products, whether that's food, fashion, or a point of interest on a tour, all of these become searchable. Everything physical is a potential search query. So camera phones aren't only for sunsets and selfies anymore. They're increasingly used for point to search. Make no mistake, this is powerful functionality. and it's allowing Google to make a play to turn image search into content discovery platform. People using Google Images today are not often there to find images, but rather for help to do something, exhibiting similar behavior to that on Pinterest. Akin to what we saw with Discover, Google is pushing adoption by integrating Lens into its other popular products, including in the Google Images tab, Google Photos, Google Assistant, and it has its own standalone app. Plus, for Pixel phone users, Lens is right there in the camera application. So knowing how significant this channel could be, the question becomes, how do you execute a picture-perfect image optimization strategy? There are, of course, the basics of image optimization, which have been around since the dawn of SEO. These are important, so if you don't already know them, take the time to read through the Google documentation. But let's spend our time today going beyond these basics and talk about the importance of enabling large images by setting the Max Image Preview Robots meta tag or by using AMP. With this opt-in, Google can display large image snippets in all forms of search results. Without it, you'll be downgraded to a thumbnail image, which obviously gives you less visibility and lowers your click-through rates. Secondly, be sure to publish a mix of image types. Having a close-up of your product with nothing but white space around it will make it easy for Google to recognize and rank it. But these types of images are for people who are low in the conversion funnel. As Google is positioning visual search as a discovery tool, having in-use images as well as photos with related items can increase your brand's visibility as they appeal to people higher in the funnel. And you'll want to get those images indexed fast. To do this, add image tags to the URLs in your existing XML sitemaps. Remember, Google will judge the image in the context of the host page, so it's better to submit them as a unit. Dedicated image sitemaps are nothing but an outdated relic. You can also use the opportunity of your XML sitemaps to provide geolocation tags, which come from your EXIF data. This data is often stripped out during file compression, but this is very much a missed opportunity. Date and geodata can provide a competitive edge in industries such as travel, restaurants, or journalism, where location and timeliness are important. And finally, you need to provide the optimally sized image. And this sounds simple enough. Many sites simply take whatever they have available within their database and they happily send that off to Google. But Google is often very specific about minimum requirements, which are different from the recommended requirements, which are the real requirements if you want to have a fighting chance of getting any visibility. But those requirements are all different for different Google products. So it feels a little bit like Google has multiple personality disorder. But after combing through way too many pages of Google technical documentation, these are the 3 safe sizes that will get you coverage within the vast majority of Google ecosystem products. And that compatibility includes with Google News, which is an aggregator that presents a customizable flow of somewhat newsworthy articles. I say somewhat because what Google defines as news is nowadays rather lax. No longer does the publisher have to have a dedicated news site. You can get in with your blog as long as the content is not overly self-promotional. And you may have already gotten in without even knowing it, as Google automatically considers any indexed content published to the web as fair game for inclusion in Google News. And just like Discover, just like Lens, Google News is prolifically accessible. It's got its own app, site, and tab in search, along with coveted placements in Universal Search, YouTube, and Google Assistant. There is also a correlation between content being featured in Google News and in Google Discover, likely because by optimizing for news, Google has another quality data point with which to understand your entity and how it relates to a user's interests. So with all that potential visibility on the line, let's talk about how you can appeal to the Google News algorithm. What's unique about it is that it works off a short-term index of only 48 hours and heavily biases fresh content. So indexing speed is paramount to success. A Google News sitemap is the bare minimum. If you see that your content is not being crawled fast enough, you can then do on top of this the use of WebSub to notify Google of new articles. Because if you don't get into that index fast, you're just going to be yesterday's news. But to have a real chance in Google News, you must create a publication in Publisher Center. Similar to Discover, News displays content by pulling on the topic layer with section feeds where you can only input data into these feeds through Publisher Center. And it allows you to display your expertise in a specific topic or in a specific location. Having Publisher Center is also a requirement for your audience to be able to follow your publication, or even better, they can subscribe to it, which increases the chances that your content will be featured in the user's For You tab, as well as in the search results for that user's personalized search. But my favorite thing about Publisher Center is that publications become eligible to be featured in the newsstand tab of the app, and you can ask to be included in the featured content section. All you have to do is write to Google and nominate yourself for the promotional placement. And I wish all SEO was as easy as knowing the right email address at Google. And this is just 3 among many products in the Google ecosystem. Now, I don't have time to cover off all of them in detail, but I will do a 1-tip lightning round for a few more. Use the Google My Business Posts feature to create a welcome offer for anyone who follows your business in Google Maps. This not only connects your entity to the user on a strategic level, but also on a very practical level, adds all your future posts to their For You tab within Google Maps. For e-commerce sites, integrate with Google Merchant Center to appear in the unpaid product listing slots in Google Images, Google Lens, Google Maps, Google Shopping tab, and Universal Search. Remember, this is free. You don't need to pay anymore to integrate with Google Merchant Center. And for those looking to get job applicants, make sure you take the time to integrate with the indexing API to keep your job listings up to date to the minute. And there's even more you can do with Google Assistant, Google Flights, Google Play, all things video. I really could go on, but I'd run out of time, so let me wrap this up. Knowing we have to have a strong foundation, there are 3 optimization tactics that really move the needle across the whole ecosystem. First, giving Google permission to fully leverage your creative assets by giving opt-in permissions for images and video, as well as using Google ecosystem-friendly sizes. This one action optimizes every single channel in the Google ecosystem. Secondly, take the time to establish your entity by claiming your Google My Business, by verifying your knowledge graph, and creating a publication in Google Publisher Center. That way, you're more likely to be connected to your audience's topics of interest or become one yourself, giving you additional visibility. Thirdly, tenaciously campaign to your audience to engage with you on the various Google platforms, the same way you do on social media. This can be by clicking a follow button, by subscribing, or by creating a collection. Because Google products are systematic. Interaction in one often pulls the lever in many more. And if you only take one thing away from this talk today, please make it this. Google is so much more than a search engine. So let's redefine SEO. It's not search engine optimization. It's search ecosystem optimization. And that's about all I have to say on that topic. I'm more than happy to take questions.
Awesome. That was really good. Thanks, Jess. I think you covered a lot of ground there, and a really good summary of it. So let's see if we've got any questions here from the community. So we'll give everyone a few minutes just to kind of get their questions together and get them in. It's really interesting, actually, because I'm a massive fan of Google My Business. And that's something that I tell everyone. If someone comes to us with next to no budget and they just want to get something done and they're a local business or even not a local business, I push them over that way and just say, look, go and spend your time there. Make sure your listing's up to date. Make sure the information is done right. Make sure your images are up to date. Make sure you're putting your posts up there. And I think it almost made my request earlier look rehearsed, which it wasn't, my Google review. We really want those reviews, and I'm going to post a link in a moment. But yeah, it was great. So here we go. We've got a couple of questions. So how to understand which type of product caters to which Google product? So can you expand on that a bit? Or so if you wouldn't mind adding a bit more detail to that in the chat function, I'll come back to it. So we've got one from Nishanth. Can we see how we can set up the Data Studio dashboard?
So the setting up of the Data Studio dashboard is very much going to depend on what you want to pull in and if it's for one brand or for multiple brands. So I represent 123 brands within my publisher. So whenever I do dashboarding, I'm aggregating business models together. So for our dashboards, it's a lot of scripting. We pull it all into Amazon Web Services and then process the data there, and then we use scripts to aggregate it, and then we just display it in Data Studio. If you're only dealing with one brand, it's much simpler. You can directly connect up your Google Analytics profile, pull in that data. You can use certain plugins to connect your Google Search Console. If you don't want to pay for it, you can just use scripting to pull in that data. Although bear in mind there's limitations with their API. You can't get all of the data perfectly. Then depending on what other products you need, there's plugins, some of them are paid, some of them are free, or if you're decent with Python, you can write your own scripts.
Okay, thanks. So also we've got one here from Freddie, my colleague Freddie. So question on publisher news that we get often. So in Marketing Trust, any tips on optimizing news, optimizing for news and publishers? Any minimum size or authority for businesses to be visible?
No, I wouldn't say there's a minimum size. I would say that the key there is quality. If you are brand new, but you're still publishing noteworthy, valuable content, you can get that into Google News. Of course, like the expertise, authority, and trust does grow over time. So the more content you publish, the easier it will become. But it's really a question of, is it indexed fast enough and is it notable enough? And that will be enough to get you in. And then you've got to build that reputation.
Thank you. I can see Freddie's appeared. Have you got anything you wanted to follow on from that, Freddie? Nope. Okay. The next one is this suite, strategy, tactics, and tools seems very publisher skewed, i.e. entities that create content frequently. How do product and service companies play here successfully? So
my primary focus right now is half on publishing and half on classified, a little bit on e-commerce. So you can, if you are more on the product side, definitely Google Merchant Center is a no-brainer. That would be much more of a focus for you. But there's no reason why you can't be creating valuable content as well. There's no reason why, as an e-commerce shop, you can't be in Google News as well. And something to understand about Google Discover is Google Discover is not just for articles. Very regularly, we get our classified listings and our e-commerce listings featured in Google Discover. The actual product is in Google Discover because Google understands from the user's intent signals, they're looking for a new mobile phone. So they proactively show them mobile phones they think they might be interested in. So there's no reason why you can't use these Discover strategies if you are more on the product or service side, as long as you have optimized product and service pages for Google to then feature within Discover. You can have your blog, your whatever you want to call that section of your site, have articles, get those in Google News. And as I said before, Google Merchant Center is going to be a very good friend to you.
And there's an update here on that one, which is the person who's asked the question is in SaaS. Is it relevant to SaaS businesses?
So I think one of the key marketing efforts of software as a service is making sure people know your brand. So I would be hoping that you're creating content for your SaaS niche. And then again, that's being featured then in Discover, that's being featured then in Google News. You're not going to have as much on the Google Lens side when you don't have a physical presence of your product. So that would be something that probably your image strategy is not going to be a primary focus, but the other channels I would invest the time into.
So just a quick question for me, actually. At the start, you took us through dashboard creation, and there was some regex in there, and then you mentioned Python at the end. To do the we've got a real mix of people on this course. We've got digital marketers who have been in the industry for a long time. We've got analysts and all sorts. What level of skills do you need to be doing some of that work that you did at the start with Data Studio and analytics?
So to set up your Discover profile, to be able to really understand how many sessions Google Discover truly drives, anyone can do that. It takes less than 5 minutes. Just follow the steps in the slide. There's a link in those slides. I didn't actually make that regex, a friend of mine did. So you can literally like copy the regex, put it into your system. It will work. So that's very easy. And then to pull that into Google Data Studio, as I mentioned before, you just do it directly through the connector. So the Google Analytics area of that dashboard, anyone should be able to do. If you want to get a plugin like Supermetrics, then the Google Search Console stuff, also anybody will be able to do that. Some of the other Google products do have paid connectors. Searchmetrics has quite a few of them actually, now that I think about it. But we prefer to do it with scripting because it just gives us a bit more control over the data.
Good stuff. So are there any more questions from the community? It doesn't look like it. So I think what I'll do, Jess, is I'm going to wrap up and thank you very much for your presentation. I think everyone, I've got a lot of thank yous here from everyone saying how much they appreciate it, as you'll see. So really valuable session. We're going to be sending out the notes and recording to everyone. Hopefully we'll start seeing a few people implement some of the stuff that you had there, and thank you for sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody who listened to my presentation ramblings.
It's a pleasure for us. Thanks, Jess. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your evening and have a good rest of your day, Jess.
You too. Bye.
Bye, everyone.